Earlier this year, I started streaming mixing and recording sessions here from my home studio. Now, since then, the whole setup has grown and evolved quite a bit, and I thought it'd be kind of cool to show everybody where I'm at right now. But it's also a way for me to explain to my YouTube subscribers why I have not been making videos lately, because this has turned out to be kind of complex. In this video, I'm going to be going over my recording setup, the studio layout, and what gear I'm using during my recording sessions. I'm also going to show you all the mics that I'm using. I'm going to talk about my computers, the cameras, and the lighting. Now, this is a pretty long video, so if there's certain things that you're not interested in, you want to skip ahead, that's cool. I'm going to have the index in the description below. Check it out. Since this is a recording studio stream where I'm doing everything from recording full bands to producing tracks to recording vocal and instrument overdubs, also doing mixing streams and equipment and software reviews, I think I'll start with the audio. This is my control room. And let me give you a quick overview of the rest of the studio. In here, I've got a vocal booth, which I don't really use on my streams very much because I tend to like doing the vocals in the control room with me just wearing headphones. But in here, I've got my amp room, which I do use the amps on the streams. I like to use these Sennheiser 421s, these kind of mics. I like these on amps a lot. I also use, of course, the Shure SM57, as well as the Sennheiser 409. And I've got all of them running to a mic panel right here, which goes to my patch bay in the control room. Then back to the control room. This room in here is the entrance to the studio, but also where we've been doing drums lately. I've got 8 mic lines running to this room, as well as 2 HDMI cables and multiple monitor cables. And then over here, this is something that I use for my mixing streams. That is a whole other chapter I'm going to have to discuss. But back into the control room. My audio interface is a Universal Audio Apollo, which has 8 inputs. And then light piped to that, I have an Apogee Rosetta, which allows me to bring in 8 more inputs for a total of 16 simultaneous inputs during my streams. My mic pre's, I've got a Germanium mic pre right here, which is an emulation of the Abbey Road Studio mic pre's. I've got a Focusrite ISA 110 mic pre with EQ, and this is one of the original issues, which is kind of special. I've got 2 Avalon mic pre's, which have compressors and EQs built in, and I really like these for bass guitar and vocals. And then next up, I've got 3 Distressor compressors, which are my favorite compressors in the whole world, and I use these all the time. Above that, I've got 4 API 512C mic pre's, and I've got this 560 graphic EQ, which is amazing, and then this 550B parametric EQ, which is pretty cool. These I use mainly for drums. And then above that, I've got 2 Cappy mic pre's, which are kind of like APIs. They're an emulation of an older API, but these are kits that you build. I'm running my mic through it right now. And then next to that, I've got something that's hand-built from England, and it emulates a Neve 1073 mic pre and EQ. Pretty amazing piece of gear. I like to run vocals when I'm doing vocal sessions. I'll run vocals through that, or guitars. Then over here, I've got a Universal Audio 710 mic pre. I like this for bass guitar sometimes, guitars other times. It's pretty cool. Below that, I've got a Summit Audio Tube Direct Box. And this thing is pretty cool because I can really drive it hard. For guitars, I mainly run my guitars into this. If I'm doing some sort of like software amp or something like that, I'll go through this first, and it gives it a nice kind of scooshy sound. Below that, I've got 2 what they call really nice compressors. I use these on the stream. I don't really use them for music. It's just for some of the guest microphones and when people are having discussions and stuff like that. Then over here, I've got a DBX 160X compressor, which sometimes I run my voice through when I'm doing a stream. Below that, I've got 2 DBX de-essers. These things are kind of vintage and really awesome. Then over here is some extra outboard gear. I don't use this on a regular basis, but the main thing I do use is I've got a headphone power amp here for the stream. So when I got people in here, they're sitting around the room. I've got headphones scattered throughout the studio here. Like I've got a couple here, I've got a couple here. I probably have another pair here. And this is so that during the streams, everybody can hear what's going on. And each one of these headphones has their own volume, bass, and treble, so they can look at their cable and see what the number is on it, and then come in and adjust it if they want it louder or quieter or something like that. My speaker monitors are Yamaha NS10Ms, kind of a standard thing, as well as these Haflers, which they don't make anymore, but I love these things because they are very hi-fi sounding, got a lot of boom to them, and I like them for mixing. All of the music is coming out of my Apollo Quad and coming into 2 channels on this board right here, which is an Allen & Heath Mix Wizard. My microphone comes in a separate channel here, which is the RE20, and then I've got the SM7 and a Shure 57, and sometimes I'm using a Neumann for my artists or co-hosts or guest speakers. Sometimes there'll be more people talking than that. Sometimes I've got several talkback mics in the control room. And the reason I like using a board is because it allows me to send different levels to different places in the studio. For instance, I've got the guys in the other room that are doing the mixing commentary. They get a slightly different mix than people sitting in here. It also allows for a different talkback system because I need a different talkback system from my commentators in the other room than people in the room with me. From here, the music gets sent to a Behringer Euphoria 2-channel interface and goes into the computer via USB. And then all the talkback mics go to the 1/8" line input on the PC. And the reason I do that is because I like to put a side chain on the music so that when we're talking, it slightly pushes down the volume of the music. The microphone I use on my streams for my voice is this Electro Voice RE20. I think this is a really great mic. You normally see people on Twitch using these right here, which is a Shure SM7, which is a cool mic. I've used this on recording sessions a lot, but primarily for rock singers and stuff like that. It is a radio announcer mic, kind of like this. But the thing about this is I feel like it's got a little bit more harshness to it and this upper mid-range boost. And I just don't think it's as good as this mic. I think this mic is far superior. Also, its rejection from sounds that are kind of coming off from the side is way better. This thing is super directional. It's also really got a smooth sound, which works good for me because I got a very mid-rangey voice. Now, when I'm actually recording vocals, my singers are typically using a Neumann U87, which I have one right here. This one is actually magic. It's a long story behind this one, and I think I need to do a video about it, but this mic has got a very interesting history, and I used it on an album that I won a Grammy for, which was pretty cool. For me, when I'm doing vocals, if I'm singing, I'm using this right here. This is a Neumann TLM 170. I got this thing in the 80s. It's kind of different than the U87. I had tried out a U87 back when I bought this thing, and I just like this one better. It's got a very smooth sound no matter where you're at on the mic. It doesn't really change the tone. I just keep it on the stand, and I don't really use it for sessions anymore because it's vintage and old. I just use it for me. I just really like this one a lot. Now, when I'm playing guitar on the stream, like if I'm doing acoustic guitar or mandolin, you'll see me bring this over. I've got 2 mics on this stand. One is a Neumann TLM 103, which is a pretty cool acoustic guitar mic. I've also got a small diaphragm condenser on here, and this is a Josephson C42. I've got one right here, so you can see it a little bit better. This thing is pretty amazing. It's an emulation of a Neumann KM 184. Other microphones that make appearances on my stream are these AKG 414s that I got in the late 80s or early 90s. This is an Electro Voice ND257B, which is a vocal mic but sounds great on electric guitar. An Octave small diaphragm condenser microphone. This weird EV mic, which just sounds cool. This is a CAD E200 large diaphragm condenser microphone that I really like for percussion and room mics. This is a Neumann M149, which is a tube mic and sounds pretty amazing. A lot of detail, but it's sensitive and I have to be careful what I use it on because it kind of sounds too good. This is an Earthworks TC30K omnidirectional condenser microphone. I used to have a stereo pair, but one broke and they don't make the parts anymore. This is a Sennheiser 441 dynamic microphone. I really like it on female vocals, mandolin, classical guitar, and snare drum. This is a Neumann clone. I've actually never used it, but I might on a future stream. This is an original Sennheiser 409, which is great for toms and electric guitars. This is an Audix D6, which is good for kick drum and floor tom, but my main kick drum mic is this AKG D112, otherwise known as the Egg. If you'd like to learn more about recording techniques, check out the rest of this channel here because I've got a lot of videos about music production, mixing, and engineering. My music computer is something that I built from scratch. I used a Cooler Master HAF XB Evo test bench LAN-box computer case. Inside, I've got an Intel i7 3.7 GHz 6-core processor, and that's sitting on an RS Z370 Gaming 7 motherboard. I've got 64 gigs of RAM, which allows me to run an insane amount of plugins and tracks in Ableton at the lowest buffer setting, which gives me low latency. My graphics card is a Radeon Pro WX 5100. I've got 6 solid-state hard drives, and I'm running the Mac OS. When I first started streaming, I was using this computer for both the music and the streaming, but being that it's a Mac OS, it's got all sorts of weird issues with routing the audio internally from my DAW into OBS. And also, as I added more cameras and overlays, every time I would stream, it would crash and crash and crash. And I was pulling my hair out trying to figure out how to fix it. Finally, after a lot of research, I found out that I probably needed to have another computer that just handled the cameras and the streaming, and it should probably be a PC, but I don't know anything about PCs. So I had a friend build me a PC. Let me show you what he did. He actually built this from spare parts from around his house. Now, it's got one of these mini gigabyte motherboards. I'm not sure of the model number, but I do know that the processor is an Intel i5 7500 running at 3.4 gigahertz. It's a 4-core processor. There's 8 gigs of RAM in here, and I'm running Windows 10 Pro 64-bit. I needed a lot of USB inputs, specifically USB 3, because up here on the top, these are only USB 2. So we put in a USB 3 card that has 5 inputs on the back, and as you can see, there's 2 cables running through that slot that go to 2 more USB 3 connectors that are on the inside. So between the cameras and the audio interface and keyboard and all that, I've got 10 USB ports in use right now, although I'm going to need more soon. The graphics card is a Gigabyte WindForce NVIDIA GTX 98 Ti. I really like it because it's got 3 display ports, 1 HDMI, and 2 DVI ports. I'm only using 3 of them right now, but I'm going to end up using all of these at some point. I've got 3 monitors in the control room. First one down here is my main music monitor, which I'm either looking at Ableton or Pro Tools. That monitor is running into this capture card, which basically splits the signal and sends one of them to the PC via a USB cable, and you can bring it into OBS as a video capture device, and then it sends it on to the actual monitor right there. Above there, I have another monitor where I like to look at Twitch so I can see exactly what everybody else is seeing. And I've got it hooked up to both computers so that when I'm not streaming, I can just hit this button and have 2 monitors for when I'm working on music. And then up on this monitor, I keep OBS open in case I got to change anything. And also for somebody else who's helping me run the cameras, it just makes it easier for them to see what's going on instead of the latency that's going to come from being online and looking at the actual Twitch feed. And then in here, this is a room we use for what I call my mixing streams. In my mixing streams, I've got another mixer that sits in here, usually with another music producer. They're able to sit here and watch what I'm mixing and also see the chat on Twitch and all that. And they make commentary on my mixing while I'm working.
Sounding good to like sounding like vital.
Exactly.
And like that's I think what you're usually trying to go for when you're mixing.
Like a lot of people overlook this like little mid-range area for claps. Sometimes they feel like you need to boost the high end, and that's not always the case. Like obviously the high end's nice, but really that area right there.
But these actually are not computer monitors. These are actually TV monitors. They're not as high resolution as a regular computer monitor, but for this purpose, they work fine. They can see what it is that I'm doing. And these are both mirrored. This is mirrored off my music computer, and this is mirrored off my streaming computer. I'm using 6 different cameras on my stream, and it's actually kind of a mismatch of different types of cameras, each with its own peculiarity. I'm gonna start with the one I'm using in this room right here. Check it out. So for my mixing streams in this other room, I'm using a Blackmagic Pocket Cinema 6K. Yes, it's definitely a bit of overkill for a Twitch stream, but it was the last camera I had to add to my setup, and I didn't have any more webcams, so I just thought, well, I'll use this. I've got it hooked up with an HDMI cable, which runs through the wall, and it comes into here. And it goes into this device called an ATM Mini Pro. It's made by Blackmagic as well, and it converts the signal to a USB, which goes into my computer. This is on loan from Justin from the Risky Biscuit band, who are a band on Twitch, and why I got into Twitch in the first place. Go check them out. Next, I've got some pretty standard 1080p webcams. This one's called Depth Tech. I use this one for a side shot to catch my co-host, Jimmy, or sometimes a side room shot. Then over here, from the other side, another 1080p Logitech webcam. Nothing too fancy, but it works pretty good. I use that for a sideways shot like this, or sometimes I'm using it to point it this way towards any guest artists that are performing over here. And then I've got this really cheap Logitech right here that I bought for my kids years ago. I use this for capturing maybe detail on my guitar because it's sitting right here in front of me. Or if there's something else going on in the room and I just want to capture something or kind of bring it over here and kind of just point it at my gear. Now, before I move on to the rest of the cameras, I want to talk about these webcams a little bit because when I first hooked them up and looked at them in OBS, it was kind of like, they didn't look good and I really struggled with the look, but I discovered something kind of interesting and I'm going to show you right here. Check this out. So you can see right here, I've got 4 of my cameras up here. The one in the top left here is my UVC camera, and it looks pretty good. All these other ones are the standard webcams, and you can see they look kind of harsh. So let me show you what I discovered. So if you come to the setting, this is the camera on my right here. You go to the setup window and you click on configure video. It'll bring up this window here. If you click on camera control, you'll see that it's got the auto exposure turned on. You got to turn that off. And typically if you turn it down a little bit, it's going to give you a better look like that there, right? Hit apply. Okay. You see already it looks better. Now I might come in here on that and adjust the color correction a little bit. Maybe just bring the gamma up a little bit to help match the other cameras, but it already looks way better. Let's go try another one. Let's go to this Depth Tech, configure video, hit over here on camera control, turn off the auto adjustment, and I've found usually -5 is a pretty good place for most of these. Hit apply. Okay. Boom. See, that one is up here. And then this really cheap camera here. Let's adjust that one now. Configure video. Camera control, turn off the auto exposure. And I'm going to take it down to -5. Apply. Okay. See, already they look pretty good. This one could probably be lightened up a little bit. Let me go into my color correction here. Probably just need to bring the gamma up some. It's a pretty terrible camera, actually. So there, that's not too bad. Now, keep in mind, every time you restart the computer, these settings here on the configure video, these will be reset. You're going to have to do this each time you open up OBS. It's a pain in the butt. I've just got it on my to-do list for every stream. It's just there. I got to go through and check them all. The other thing that's important is when you first load in a webcam, often this is set like this, default. Like the resolution is not always what you think it is. Like I've found that if I go to custom and click on here, sometimes it's set below the highest resolution or what you actually need. Sometimes it's down here on like 1280 by 720. Next is my main camera in the middle that I have pointed at me, and this one is really super interesting. It's called a UVC camera. It's not like your typical USB webcam. It is hooked up with USB, and you don't really need any software for it, but what's cool about these things is that they're very solidly made. This is all metal right here. It'll shoot up to 4K, and you can actually switch out these lenses. It's a particular type. I think it's like a CS lens or something like that. This one right here is a telephoto lens, but I could switch it out with a wide-angle lens. I think I bought this thing for around $100 or a little less. It's got aperture control on it, which is your depth of focus. It's got zoom control and an actual manual focus knob on it, which I like because I want to set it the way I want it to be set and not doing any kind of autofocus on it. I've fallen in love with this camera. It's just got a more professional look than a webcam. It's kind of like being between a webcam and a nice DSLR, but without spending hundreds of dollars. And this one is made by Mikosi. And for my last camera, I'm actually using my iPhone. There's a piece of software on here called Camo. You put the software on your phone, and there's also some software on your computer that connects them via USB. This works on PC and Mac. I'm using the free version, but for a few dollars more, you get all sorts of extra options. I take the camera and I put it up here in this corner. one of my biggest struggles when I started filming and streaming down here was the lighting, because this right here is actually about the level of lighting I'll use when I'm working on music. So the first thing I did was to install 4 lights that are just going to give me general room lighting and that are easy to turn on and control pretty quickly. So I put in 4 lights. So now I've got more lighting throughout the room. And these are actually just leftover track lighting. I took them off the track and attached clamps to them and just wired up my own wiring going down to dimmer switches down here. I got one back, well, you can't see it, it's down there. Same thing over here, I've got a dimmer switch for this one, and I'm using dimmable LEDs. And one of the important things to remember is that you want to make sure that you're matching the color, the warmth or coldness of the light bulbs to each other. So all the lights in your room should be 2700 or 5000 or whatever you like. I tend to use 2700 on everything because it's really warm, but if I'm matching the white balance on my camera, it works out really good. Next, I added a ring light to get my sitting position. This is a 15-inch ES-DDI PLV 360 40-watt ring light, and it's really, really cool. I actually barely have it up. Let me show you. I've got it like 25%. This is my normal lighting level here. It gets pretty bright. And I like being able to dial it in with a dial so I can get the brightness just right. It's also got a temperature control. Gets really warm. Goes all the way to really, really cold. Next, I needed to light up the guest sitting position. And for that, I chose an 18-inch Angler 90-watt ring light. I'm not sure what the exact model number is. But what I really like about this thing, besides it getting really, really, really bright, is that it's actually got an LED readout here, which is really cool so that you can repeat your light settings. If you know you like a particular lighting level, you can just always get exactly where you had it before. And also the range of color temperature, it'll go all the way up to 5600K, which is really, really cold and blue, or it'll go all the way down to 3200K. Yeah, look at that, really super warm. And it's got the nice added feature of having a USB port right on the back. It's one of my favorite lights. Next, I needed another light that I could use to light up this area here if I had another musician on a stream, or to light up the drummer in the other room if I was recording a drummer. So I ended up trying out this Whedbee LJJ45 18-inch light. It's pretty cool. I wasn't crazy about it at first because I didn't really like these controls, these touch buttons. They just weren't as responsive. Also, the color temperature of the light seemed like it only had 3 different settings: super cold, really warm, or in between. And as I said before, it's very important that you match up the color temperature of your lights in the room to get really good shots. Also, the brightness, it just seemed like there are a few steps going from, see there, it also, it's like affecting the color balance when I wasn't hitting it. I wasn't crazy about this. So, I was making it work, but then I figured out if you put a battery in this thing and use the remote, you have a lot more control over the brightness and the color temperature. Check it out. If I go like this, there's a lot more steps between bright and dim, and the same with the color balance. Look at that. There's several steps in between instead of 3. There's a whole bunch. So now I'm able to dial this in closer to the other lights. So if you got a remote with your ring light or any kind of light, don't just set it aside. Try it out. It might actually give the light more functionality. Well, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Remember to subscribe, ring the notification bell, and always be unique.